How terrifying is a kid who knows some law? A netizen once said, I was playing on the slide with my daughter when a boy ran up to me and asked, Uncle, can you give your daughter to me? Innocent children's words. I smiled and replied, she's my lifeline. I can't give her to you easily. The boy then asked me, if she died, would you be very sad? I suddenly became alert. I had never seen this kid before. This playground was built with donations from local businesses, and I knew most of the kids who played here. I suspected the boy might be an accomplice of human traffickers, so I took my daughter and left. When we got home, I told her not to go to that playground recently and to stay away from the boy. She nodded. A few days later, my daughter suddenly told me that she saw the boy leading the daughter of the bakery owner next door somewhere. She wanted to follow them but remembered my words and didn't dare. The bakery is run by a divorced mother named Hanyu and her 4-year-old daughter, Xiaoqi. The neighbors knew it was not easy for her to raise a child alone and always took care of her. I immediately called Hanyu, but she seemed to be out delivering a cake and didn't answer. About an hour and a half later, Hanyu rushed into my shop like a madwoman, grabbed my daughter, and frantically asked, where is Xiaoqi? Tell me quickly. My daughter was scared and incoherent. I told Hanyu to call the police immediately and went with her to search, but the trail went cold. After crossing the street, the police were very effective. Based on my description and nearby surveillance footage, they found the boy that night. His name was Liu Qi. Liu Qi insisted that he had not kidnapped Xiaoqi. His parents also lied for him, saying he had been home all the time. The police presented surveillance footage to expose their lie, and only then did Liu Qi hesitantly say, I'm not 12 years old yet, so I should go to jail, right? Liu Qi led us to an abandoned building nearby, pointing to a small dirt pit on the ground. She's in there. The police dug up the dirt and found a phone box buried in a small pit, the kind used for express delivery. When they opened the lid, they found Xiaoqi curled up inside. Her eyes were open, her mouth slightly ajar, her big eyes filled with terror, and he broke down on the spot, lunging at Liu Qi to harm him. But the police stopped her. The police had Liu Qi recount the entire crime process, and his clear train of thought made my spine tingle. Liu Qi said he found this small pit at the construction site and got the idea to bury something alive in it. At first, he wanted to bury a wild cat, but the cat ran out immediately, and he failed. So Liu Qi changed his target to a child, but the pit was too small. So Liu Qi tied the shoelaces together, measured the size of the pit, and chose a suitable target by measuring with the shoelace before abducting. He also said that when choosing targets, he only selected little girls because they were less likely to resist and their bodies were more flexible and easier to fold. Did you kill her first before burying her? Someone asked. Liu Qi shook his head. I had her lie down in the pit herself. He set up a ruse, first bringing 2 large cardboard boxes and having Xiaoqi lie down in them, giving her chocolate to make her think they were playing a game. Then, he had her crawl into the foam box he placed in the pit, and Xiaoqi did so without any suspicion. After she lay down, I covered the box with a wooden board, placed some bricks on top, and then buried it with soil. Liu Qi said Xiaoqi struggled throughout the process, so he jumped on the wooden board and stopped a few times until Xiaoqi stopped moving, and you couldn't bear to listen to the entire process and fainted, and the police took her to the hospital for emergency treatment. I heard a few veteran policemen muttering, damn it, I've been a cop for so many years, and I've never seen such a beast. If his parents weren't here, I'd want to beat him to death. After Xiaoqi's tragedy spread, neighbors came to ask for Liu Qi's address, saying they wanted to seek justice for Hanyu and her daughter. But the privacy of juvenile offenders is protected by law, and the police demanded that I not disclose any personal information about Liu Qi, otherwise I would be held responsible. A few days later, Hanyu suddenly came to my shop crying, saying the police were preparing to close the case. The reason was that Liu Qi was under 12 years old and had no criminal responsibility, so the police had to dismiss the case according to the law. I was stunned. Liu Qi clearly killed someone, but not only did he not have to go to jail, he didn't even have to go to court. What kind of logic is this? The police said that even if I sued on my own, the prosecutor's office wouldn't accept it. At most, I could file a civil lawsuit for compensation from Liu Qi's parents. But who can give me justice for my daughter? And you cried so hard that the corners of her eyes bled. Worse, Liu Qi's parents didn't even apologize. They wouldn't answer Hanyu's calls, and even when contacted by the police, they only said they were busy and didn't have time to deal with her. My wife couldn't bear it and made some soup for Hanyu. We are all mothers. Some tragedies are beyond anyone's control. You are still young. Find someone new and have another child. Think of it as Xiaoqi's reincarnation. Hanyu's voice was hoarse. I can't get over it. When I close my eyes, I feel like I hear her crying in front of me, saying she died with a grievance. My heart feels like it's being stabbed over and over again. We all understood her pain as parents. We persuaded her to retrieve her daughter's body and handle the funeral, then think about filing a lawsuit later. The memorial was set up in Hanyu's bakery. All the neighbors came, but everyone just repeated the same comforting words. Hanyu cried until she was exhausted and numb while eating the memorial noodles. Old Zhang, who sells roast duck, said Xiaoqi's tragedy was also Hanyu's fault for not taking care of her. Several women immediately attacked him, You meant try looking after a child for a day. Do you never eat while watching them 24/7? One fatty, who says meat, angrily smoked a cigarette. If this happened to me, I'd kill that little beast even if I went to jail. It's a shame Hanyu is such a good woman with no man to help her get revenge. Hanyu had no relatives, so my wife and I helped her with arrangements. I saw my daughter playing alone at the door and called her over, warning her not to run around. She nodded silently. I was puzzled. This little girl usually talks back a bit. Why was she so obedient today? My daughter grinned and opened her mouth, showing the chocolate on her teeth. Because she had severe cavities, we forbid her from eating sweets. Did Han give this to you? My daughter shook her head. It was the brother who took Xiaoqi. He said Xiaoqi didn't finish the chocolate, so he gave it to me. I broke out in a cold sweat, quickly handing my daughter to my wife, telling her to keep an eye on her and not let her out of her sight for a second. I took some people and searched the surrounding area, but didn't find any sign of Liu Qi. It seemed he had already run away. The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. What if Liu Qi took my daughter and buried her in a small pit too? I absolutely couldn't let that happen. That night, I secretly told Hanyu that Liu Qi had come looking for my daughter. Hanyu's eyes widened with anger, and she grabbed my arm. Tell me next time, I'll kill him. I looked at Xiaoqi's black and white photo with a smiling face and made a decision in my heart. Do you really want revenge? I have a way, and I can make sure you don't go to jail. Hanyu agreed without any hesitation. So, I had my daughter play as usual, but secretly observed from the shadows, looking for Liu Qi's whereabouts. Hanyu and I took turns, and after about a month, I finally saw Liu Qi sneaking around near the playground. I called my daughter and told her to go home immediately. And sure enough, Liu Qi followed. I drove a van and followed Liu Qi, kidnapping him on a road. Without surveillance, I took Liu Qi to Hanyu's warehouse. Hanyu brought out Xiaoqi's photo and lit a stick of incense. Xiaoqi, Mommy will let you rest in peace today. Liu Qi cried and struggled. Uncle, Auntie, I'm just a kid. How can you bear to hurt a child? Hanyu didn't hesitate at all, grabbing Liu Qi and shoving him into the dough mixer. Liu Qi weighed about 50 kilograms, while the mixer's maximum capacity was 65 kilograms. Even so, it was almost impossible to feed a person incompletely. One of Liu Qi's legs got stuck outside, and Hanyu took a large mallet used for pounding dough and smashed his joint until it broke, then shoved it inside. Honestly, I didn't know how Hanyu planned to deal with Liu Qi. Our original agreement was that I would kidnap Liu Qi, and she would take revenge for Xiaoqi. Hanyu turned on the machine, and the rotating blade scraped off a large piece of flesh from Liu Qi's body. Liu Qi began to scream. I promise I'll never kill anyone again. I'll be a good kid. Uncle, Auntie, please forgive me. I couldn't bear it anymore and stopped the machine. Don't do this. Just give him a quick death. Hanyu, with bloodshot eyes, slapped something down in front of me. It was a brand new shoelace to tie together, just about the height of my daughter. I could only step aside, allowing Hanyu to turn the machine to full speed. Liu Qi's screams were gradually drowned out by the machine's roar. Half an hour later, what was left in the basin could no longer be called a body. Hanyu put the remains into her bread oven. Hanyu threw in a few dough pieces to cover the smell of burning flesh. This was her usual baking time, so even if there was a lot of smoke, no one would suspect anything. After burning Liu Qi's body, Hanyu cleaned the oven thoroughly, then placed bread bought from another place in her shop. I handed Hanyu the prepared statement and excuses. The real battle starts now. The police will keep questioning you. Are you ready? Hanyu's voice was terrifyingly calm. Don't worry, I won't give my life for a beast. The next day, the police arrived at Hanyu's bakery with 5 or 6 officers. I immediately notified the neighbors to support Hanyu. Everyone sympathized with her, and thousands of people showed up, making the police uneasy. What's going on? Attacking the police is a serious crime. One fatty shouted. Chief, we don't want to cause trouble. We just want to know why you're investigating the victim instead of catching the killer. An old policeman with 2 stars and 2 stripes on his shoulder stepped forward. I understand everyone's feelings, but the police closed the case according to strict legal procedures. We have to follow the rules. Right, old Jean, who sells roast duck, wasn't satisfied. Last time, an old man fell in front of my shop and tried to extort me for 20,000 yuan. The police said the old man was vulnerable and made me pay 15,000. Why didn't you follow the rules then? The old policeman was speechless, and the crowd was furious. Xiao Yu, don't be afraid. If anyone makes a fuss, we'll be with you every day at the police station. Finally, Hanyu calmed everyone down. Thank you all for your care. But Xiaoqi's murder wasn't the police's fault. On the contrary, they found the killer quickly. I'm very grateful to them. Everyone, please go home and don't interface with the police investigation. Hanyu performed excellently. I had instructed her to establish a positive image of cooperation with the police. Police officers are human too, and they bring their emotions into their work. If they sympathize with Hanyu, they won't dig too deep, allowing Hanyu to get through this. The old policeman wiped his sweat. Wow, such a big crowd. You seem very popular. While making tea, Hanyu bitterly smiled. We small business owners aren't like you officials. No one gives us a salary. and no one cares when we're in trouble, so we help each other get by. But what brings you here today? She poured a cup of poor tea, and the old policeman smiled gratefully, handing over a business card. Wuzan, I was there the day we found Xiaoqi. I'm very sorry for what happened to her. But today, we're here about Liu Qi. Yesterday, we received a report from his parents that he was missing. Considering your conflict, the police suspect you might be involved. But don't be alarmed. This is just a routine procedure and doesn't mean you're a suspect. I realized Wuzhen was lying. If it were a missing person case, they wouldn't need so many officers. They suspected Han Yu of killing Liu Qi, and we're here to search for evidence. But this didn't faze Han Yu. We had rehearsed extensively on how to deal with police questioning. However, Han Yu's approach surprised me. She placed her wrist on the table. Yes, I killed him. You can arrest me. Wuzhen and I both showed expressions of surprise. Miss Anne, everything you say now carries legal consequences. Are you really confessing to murdering Liu Qi? Yes, I confess to being the murderer. Please tell me, if I can't personally avenge my daughter's killer, what's the point of living? Han Yu began to choke up, and Wuzhen was at a loss, quickly calling in a female officers to comfort her. While shocked, I secretly admired Han Yu's cleverness. Her response was more brilliant than I imagined. Criminal investigation is a professional field, supported by psychology, biology, and centuries of case-solving experience. Honestly, deceiving experienced police officers during interrogation is nearly impossible. They can detect lies from subtle details. My original strategy was for Han Yu to stay silent as much as possible, but Han Yu's proactive approach threw the problem back at the police. I'm telling you a fact, believe it or not. Wuzhen didn't seem to take Han Yu's words seriously, thinking she was just venting. This hurdle was crossed without incident. He took out a notebook and began asking Han Yu what she was doing at specific times. Reconstructing the timeline, the police could deduce Liu Qi's exact time of disappearance from surveillance footage. But it didn't matter, because I kidnapped Liu Qi while Han Yu was in her shop, with many customers as witnesses. As long as the police didn't suspect accomplices, Han Yu's alibi was rock solid. Wuzhen reached the same conclusion. Han Yu didn't have the opportunity to commit the crime. He took out a pair of medical rubber gloves. Miss Anne, if you don't mind, we'll take a quick look around your shop. Don't worry, we won't touch anything. The officers immediately began their search, bagging anything that could be a weapon, from rolling pins to bread knives to butter knives. One officer meticulously checked the storage room, closets, and refrigerator. Another used transparent tape to collect hair and fingerprints from the floor, and another tapped the walls and ceiling to check for hidden spaces. Wuzhen showed particular interest in the oven, saying he was from Xinjiang and his family had a similar one for baking naan and buns, though much smaller. By the way, what's the highest temperature this oven can reach? Around 500 degrees. I usually only go up to 300. Wuzhen absent-mindedly nodded, probably calculating if the oven could be used to cremate a body. Human bones decompose at 600 to 800 degrees. Without reaching this temperature, you'd be left with a pile of charred bones, which is hard to handle. But I have made a tool to temporarily extend the oven's chimney, raising the temperature above 800 degrees to dispose of Liu Qi's body. After the search, the police put everything back. Wuzhen asked Han Yu, besides this shop, do you have any other rented or purchased properties, warehouses, or residences? Han Yu shook her head. No, we live upstairs because I have to get up at 3 in the morning to knead dough. Xiaoqi always complained about not being able to sleep in. She started crying before finishing her sentence. Wuzhen sighed, patting Han Yu's shoulder. Don't worry, we'll clear your name soon. A few days later, the police returned everything they had taken from Han Yu's shop, indicating they found no suspicious evidence. I breathed a sigh of relief. This process was more torturous than I expected, and I hadn't slept well for days, my mind filled with visions of being arrested. Without a criminal case, we had one. No criminal case meant no detention and no enhanced interrogation. As long as Han Yu was cleared of suspicion, the police would treat Liu Qi's case as a runaway. With so many missing children nationwide, Liu Qi wasn't special enough to warrant an extensive search. As for Liu Qi's parents, they wouldn't pursue it further. I heard they each had affairs and neglected their son. After Liu Qi's grandmother died, they gave him pocket money and left him to fend for himself. After Liu Qi killed someone, they were even more reluctant to return home, wanting to push the child onto each other. Xiaoqi's tragedy was partly their fault, but the law couldn't punish them. A few days later, a special visitor came to my shop. Wuzhen. When I noticed him, he was chatting with my wife. I quickly brought over a dish of pickles. Chief, what brings you here? Wuzhen smiled. No need for formalities. I was just hungry and came in for a bowl of noodles. By the way, I heard from your wife that you graduated from a prestigious university. Someone of your talent running a noodle shop is a waste, isn't it? I smiled. I just wanted to spend more time with my kid. Besides, no customer is so picky that they'd call me in the middle of the night to complain. Wu Zhang sat her down and started chatting casually, his conversation seemingly without any particular focus, as if he really was just here for a meal. I decided to probe. Chief, I see you have 2 stars and 2 stripes. Isn't that a high enough rank to stay in the office instead of running around outside? Oh, don't mention it. I'm not suited for politics. I just like being on the scene, studying case details and whatnot. I realized that if Wu Zhen had worked his way up from the grassroots by solving cases, it meant he had probably handled hundreds of cases with no unsolved ones. In other words, Wu Zhen was a genuine detective. I swallowed hard. Competing with someone like him was suicidal. I decided to find an excuse to leave, but Wu Zhen suddenly pulled out a surveillance photo showing Liu Qi. The authorities think Liu Qi might have run away and plan to treat this as a missing person case, but I disagree. He tapped the photo. Liu Qi's behavior was abnormal. He was clearly hiding his tracks. I think he was stalking someone. He took out another photo. Hair in a bun, white sweater, blue overalls. I remember you have a daughter about Xiaoqi's age. My heart pounded. The most crucial clue in a police investigation is motive. Murder, especially, requires a strong motive. I had planned that if the police didn't know my motive, I could cover for Han Yu with her alibi, but I didn't expect Wu Zhen to deduce my motives so quickly, suspecting me as Han Yu's accomplice, making her alibi worthless. If Wu Zhen reopened the investigation, both Han Yu and I would become suspects, and the police would search more thoroughly than ever, ruining everything. Sweat poured down my face, my palms grew cold, and the world spun around me. Wu Zhen smiled. I'll make it clear that I'm not here to investigate. I'm not carrying any recording or listening devices, so don't worry. Frankly, I sympathize with Han Yu and understand why you did what you did. I have some connections in the legal system. If you turn yourselves in, I'll help you get reduced sentences. I couldn't help but ask, how much reduction are we talking about? Wu Zhen's smile widened. For you, kidnapping carries a sentence of over 5 years. If it results in death, it's at least 15. But if you deny knowing about Han Yu's revenge plan, I can get you 5 years. As for Han Yu, the court will consider her grief and long-term depression, likely reducing her sentence to 17 or 18 years. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Liu Qi murdered Xiaoqi and didn't serve a single day in jail. And you, on the other hand, would pay with the most precious years of her life. Isn't the essence of the law fairness? I gradually calmed down and looked Wu Zhen in the eye. Thank you for the warning, Chief. I will protect my daughter at all costs. I emphasized the last 4 words, and Wu Zhen's smile faded. In my years on the force, I've never seen a case with no loose ends. Are you sure you won't reconsider? I've made up my mind. I'll always stand on the side of justice. Killing a child isn't justice. Your moral standards are too low. Killing isn't. But if the law can protect me, I'll use all means to protect myself. I believe that's justice. Wu Zhen seemed to find further discussion pointless. Sire, we'll see about that. Admitting defeat now would be premature. Motive alone wasn't enough. Wu Zhen needed evidence. A criminal case requires a complete chain of evidence. The weapon, the body, the crime scene. Wu Zhen needed to find at least one of these. As long as he found none, we would win. Wu Zhen indeed reopened the investigation. Down scenes of officers turned Han Yu's bakery inside out. They didn't miss an inch of the floor, using tape to collect samples, spraying luminol to check for blood traces, even inspecting the ceiling for hidden spaces. 2 officers set up a yellow police line outside, declaring any intrusion a disturbance, leaving the neighbors helpless. Wu Zhen didn't search my shop. He seemed convinced Han Yu had killed Liu Qi, focusing all his efforts on her. During the search, Wu Zhen watched Han Yu closely. She seemed distracted, holding a piece of dry bread, breaking it bit by bit. A young officer reported to Wu Zhen, Chief, our search found no traces related to the case, nor any potential murder weapons. Wu Zhen shook his head. Killing a half-grown child only requires hands, not necessarily a weapon. Just find the body and crime traces. He asked, have you checked the oven? Did you test the temperature? Yes, the highest it can reach is just over 500 degrees. Wu Zhen circled the bakery, pointing to the chimney. This type of oven can be modified to increase temperature. Take the chimney down. Check for hair in the gaps. The officers complied, dismantling the chimney, removing the insulation, and examining the fiberglass inside. But the chimney was clean, almost new. Wu Zhen put on gloves and entered the shop, scrutinizing the equipment, finally focusing on the dough mixer. Han Yu's bread crumbled with a crack. Wu Zhen noticed, inspecting the mixer closely, finding the mixer's blades were new. With fresh lubricant, he took the blades for luminol testing, but found no blood traces. Wu Zhen was clearly disappointed, instructing the officers to take the mixer for DNA testing. A few days later, the results came back. Nothing. Wu Zhen was indeed sharp, deducing our method of killing and disposing of the body just by observation. But he didn't know the evidence was right under his nose. Wu Zhen left empty-handed, and the neighbors gathered at the police station, demanding the harassment of Han Yu stop, making it to the news. Han Yu eventually calmed the situation, seeking compensation from the police for cleaning and lost work time. I knew Wu Zhen wouldn't give up, but he couldn't mobilize resources quickly. The higher higher-ups had decided to treat Liu Qi's case as a runaway. I relaxed, but the matter wasn't over. After the police cleared Han Yu, Liu Qi's parents kept harassing her, unable to accept the loss of their son, despite neglecting him when he was alive. The neighbors caught them harassing Han Yu and beat them up, scaring them away. But Han Yu's shop was often vandalized at night, with windows shattered multiple times. It was clear Liu Qi's parents were behind it. I suggested Han Yu call the police, but she didn't want to alert them. Meanwhile, Han Yu's mental state worsened. She was once a beautiful woman, so attractive my wife would get jealous if I looked at her twice. Since Xiaoqi's tragedy, she had lost all her radiance and never smiled again. We advised her to close the shop, go home for a while, or move away permanently, but she refused to leave the place where she had lived with her daughter. During holidays, with my wife's consent, I invited Han Yu to our home for meals. She didn't touch any meat, absent-mindedly eating a bowl of plain rice, as if eating was just to maintain life. While my wife was washing dishes, Han Yu said to me, "Since Xiaoqi died, I often hear her voice, sometimes feeling like she's hiding behind me, playing hide and seek. But when I turn around expectantly, I'm crushed by reality every time. That child is gone. Never to play pranks or make a mess with dough. Never to call me mommy again." I thought revenge would heal my wounds, so I killed Liu Qi. But the scar didn't heal. It only grew wider. Was I wrong? I wanted to comfort her, but Han Yu's mental state was worse than I imagined. Killing is a deeply inhumane act. Even trained soldiers suffer from guilt after war. Han Yu was just a mother who had experienced tragedy. Even if anger drove her to revenge, her personality was bound to collapse over time. Han Yu wiped her tears and suddenly said, "Brother, I want to do something for Liu Qi." I instinctively thought she wanted to confess and panicked. "Are you crazy? My daughter isn't grown yet. I can't go to jail. I don't care. I have to do this." Han Yu's decision made me restless. If she confessed, I'd be implicated, meaning at least 5 years in prison, which was the best case scenario. If the police pursued my obstruction and deception, listing me as an accomplice, I might miss my daughter's wedding. Given Han Yu's current mental state, nothing she did would surprise me. I couldn't reason with her. If things got too bad, I might have to. I quickly dismissed the thought, but more terrifying ideas popped into my mind. People, in the end, are selfish. My father-in-law wasn't feeling well, so my wife decided to take our daughter to visit for a couple of days, leaving me alone at the shop. Han Yu suddenly messaged me, saying a light was broken in her shop, and she couldn't fix the circuit breaker. She asked for my help. I took a pair of gloves from the drawer, putting them in my pocket. I decided to make one last attempt to persuade Han Yu, if possible. I didn't want to do this, but if it came down to choosing between her and me, I had to choose myself. When I arrived at Han Yu's shop, she said the circuit breaker was in a small room, which used to be a bathroom, without windows and very dark. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and searched for a while but didn't see any circuit breaker. Suddenly, the door behind me locked. I was shocked, banging on the door, demanding why Han Yu locked me in. Han Yu was silent, but I heard her put a big lock on the door. My heart pounded. Had she guessed my plan and locked me in to confess to the police? Damn it. I kicked the door a few times. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. 2 people had arrived. I dared not make a sound. This door was an old-style bathroom door with a vent at the bottom. I lay on the ground. Peeking through the vent, I saw that the late-night visitors were Liu Qi's parents, not the police. I was puzzled. Why did Han Yu invite them? Did she plan to atone with her life? But Liu Qi's parents weren't fools. Even if Han Yu admitted her crime, they wouldn't kill her in a fit of rage. They'd just call the police. After all, their love for Liu Qi was meager. Unlike Han Yu served them tea and 2 pieces of dry bread, the kind she had been eating recently. Liu Qi's mother slammed the table. "Where's my son? Hand him over, or you'll regret it today." Han Yu calmly said, "I didn't imprison Liu Qi. He hid here himself, saying he didn't want to see you because you didn't love him and didn't deserve to be his parents." Liu Qi's mother's face turned red. "Bullshit. Who said I don't love my son? Prove it to me. These breads are failed bakes, too hard to eat. If you can finish them, I'll believe you." Liu Qi's parents exchanged glances, reluctantly breaking the bread and eating it with tea. Soon, they finished. Han Yu stood up and whispered something in Liu Qi's mother's ear. Liu Qi's mother went berserk, strangling Han Yu, while Liu Qi's father grabbed a heavy rolling pin and smashed Han Yu's head. With each blow, Han Yu's limbs twitched, but she didn't resist. I tightly covered my mouth. After the attack, Liu Qi's parents fled in panic, not even cleaning up. I quickly called 120 and the police, then kicked the door a few more times until the hinges came off. I squeezed out through the gap, checked Han Yu's injuries, but it was too late. Her skull was severely deformed. Blood mixed with thick brain matter flowed from her ears and nose. Strangely, despite the brutal assault, Han Yu was smiling. Her hands were in a relaxed posture, as if embracing death peacefully. The police arrived, and I provided enough clues and evidence. Within hours, Liu Qi's parents parents were arrested. The court charged them with murder. Liu Qi's father received the death penalty, and his mother got life imprisonment. Utterly, when the prosecutor asked why they killed Han Yu, they remained silent. A few days later, my daughter brought me a letter from Han Yu. When you read this letter, I'm probably dead. Don't mourn for me. I'm happy to reunite with Xiaoqi in the afterlife. Death is my best release. I've been reflecting on whether my revenge had any meaning. I found no comfort in Liu Qi's death, only endless emptiness. But as a mother, I had to wield the blade of love. It was my duty, not needing anyone's with the lost judgment. Ultimately, I couldn't forgive Liu Qi's parents. If they had loved their child a little more, I might not have faced such a tragedy. Even if the law won't pursue them, I can't let them get away. I'll use my life to punish them. It's the only thing I can do for Liu Qi. Han Yu left some money for her funeral, asking me to place her ashes with Xiaoqi's. I fulfilled her wish, visiting their grave with my daughter every year, offering incense and praying they reunite in the next life. As my daughter grew older, she regretted not following them to warn Xiaoqi, possibly preventing the tragedy. I gently patted her head. This world has many unexpected dangers. Daddy can't always protect you, so you must protect yourself. Otherwise, Daddy will avenge you even at the cost of his life. My daughter hugged me tightly. I don't want Daddy to avenge me. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Since then, my shop had a regular customer, Wu Zan. His superiors made him step back from the front lines, so he left the police force and became a private detective. He treated my shop like his cafeteria, often asking for a membership card. Hey, high achiever, tell me, was my deduction wrong? This was Wu Zhen's favorite question. Fed up with his pestering, I decided to give him an answer. Your deduction was spot on, but you searched the wrong place. The crime didn't happen in Han Yu's shop. Wu Zhen was surprised. How is that possible? I thought Han Yu would definitely kill Liu Qi in her shop to honor her daughter. She did kill Liu Qi in her shop, but Han Yu had two shops. The other one was right next door, identical in setup. Han Yu's landlord, envious of her business, kept raising the rent to force her out. So Han Yu found a new place early, moving the sign and everything identical to her old shop. Wu Zhen muttered. Even if I didn't find the crime scene, why didn't I find Liu Qi's ashes? Given his weight, no matter how cleanly you burned, there should be around 2 kilograms of ashes, but I found no trace in the drains or trash. I shook my head. I don't know. Han Yu dealt with the ashes? This question may never be answered. Wu Zhen left disappointed. Han Yu didn't tell me how she disposed of the ashes, but I had a guess. She likely mixed the ashes into the flour and baked them into bread. After killing Liu Qi, Han Yu ate dry bread daily, chewing it bit by bit with water. Those must have been extremely unpalatable, possibly mixed with bones and teeth. Yet she finished them. She left the last pieces of bread for Liu Qi's parents, tricking them into eating. This was a mother's revenge. This is a short story, and it ends here. I update my stories daily, so if you like them, please subscribe.